Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So in today's video, I will be making my prediction for the 11 governor races happening around the country that will be taking place 1 week from today. Starting off on the West Coast with the state of Washington. Republicans got their star recruit here, former congressman and former sheriff of Kings County, where Seattle is located, that being Dave Reichert. He has done very well in fundraising in this very Democrat state, running against the Democrat nominee, the incumbent Attorney General Bob Ferguson. In fact, Republicans actually have more money to spend than Democrats do in the final days of the campaign. That's how well Reichert has done at fundraising. That being said, it's still Washington, and money can only go so far when Republicans are running up against the partisan lean of a state that is very much to the left. The closest polls of this race show Democrats leading here by 5 to 7 points, but other polls show it being a much wider gap, closer to a 10 to 15 point lead for Attorney General Bob Ferguson. Republicans did get 45% of the vote in the jungle primary for the governorship earlier this year, where all candidates of all parties appear on the same ballot, and those results in this state tend to translate well to the general election. Republicans here should perform better than normal, but even with their most ideal candidate, the best that they can hope for is probably for it to be a likely Democrat state and about a 10-point race, which would still be an improvement from 4 years ago. It could be closer with such a well-known and good Republican candidate, but as of right now, I think this is the state of the race. Also, to clarify my rating scale, when I say it is lean, I mean it is going to that candidate between 1 to 7 points. When I say it's tilt, it's going to a certain candidate by less than a point. And when I say it's safe, it's voting for one party or the other by more than 15 points. Just so everyone has context as to how I'm rating these states. Over in Montana, the Republican governor, Greg Gianforte, was elected to a first term in 2020, winning by 13 points over the then Democrat incumbent lieutenant governor. Now he's running for re-election against a random Democrat, and his smallest lead in the polls is 16 points. He is a very underratedly conservative governor, and he is going to win by a safe margin of probably about 20 points or more. Right next door, we have North Dakota, and we don't have to talk about this one much. I think everyone knows how this is going. Republicans literally won this very red state at the governor level in 2020 by 40 points, with Doug Burgum winning re-election there. But he's not running for a third term, with the Republican nominee looking to replace Burgum being Kelly Armstrong, the sitting congressman from the state, who is a moderate, weak Republican at best and a rhino at worst. While I do hope he has a better record as governor than he did in Congress, there is no doubt he's going to win this race by a lot. It might be by less, since he's not the incumbent, he's running up against a state senator, but at the very minimum, he's going to win by 25 to 30 points. Down in Utah, yet another very Republican state, where the Republican leadership is less than impressive. Incumbent Governor Spencer Cox is running for re-election, and he is another moderate squish, just like Kelly Armstrong. He refused to back Donald Trump until after the assassination attempt against the former president, and has also stated in the past that he did not vote for Trump the first 2 times. On top of that, as a governor of a state that regularly votes for Republicans by more than 30 points, he's very weak on social issues and is probably one of the wokest Republicans out there. Really just a sad excuse for a quote-unquote conservative governor from a quote-unquote conservative state. His margin might be trimmed by a little bit due to some conservative protest votes, since his actual conservative challenger from the primary is running a write-in campaign in the general election And considering Cox only barely survived the primary as the sitting governor, don't be surprised if a lot of Republican voters vote against him. That being said, despite him being an absolutely useless governor, Spencer Cox is still going to hold on and win re-election by a comfortable margin in the state, holding it for Republicans, although I wish it was a better Republican that was holding this state and keeping it red. Over in Missouri, the Lieutenant Governor, Mike Kehoe, is now the GOP nominee for governor. He won a very competitive primary for the governorship nomination, beating out a more conservative state senator, unfortunately. However, Kehoe does not seem to be the level of bad that Spencer Cox or Kelly Armstrong are, in the sense of how weak they are on policy, so I think he should be just fine as governor, not really an upgrade or a downgrade. He is running against a decent Democrat challenger, that being the current minority leader in the House for the Democrats. And considering the current incumbent governor, Mike Parson, won re-election in 2020 by 17 points, I expect Kehoe as the incumbent to win by a little less and underperform Trump at the top of the ticket. And the polling kind of reflects this, so I actually expect him to win by a little less than 15 points, but just under that threshold, and it's very possible that he could win by more than 15 points. But I'm being conservative with my prediction for now and saying he will win it by less than 15. Over in Indiana, the sitting U.S. Senator from Indiana, Mike Braun, retired after only serving one term to run for governor of the state. He was one of the country's most conservative senators and will be a big upgrade over the current governor, Eric Holcomb, who is really underwhelming, failing conservatives and being weak on policy on many occasions. He is running against a former Republican turned Democrat, also being the former superintendent of public instruction. Polls have this race surprisingly closer than one would expect, but I still expect Mike Braun to win this election fairly easily and fairly comfortably by a margin of 10 to 15 points. Again, Trump won this state by 17 points in 2020. I expect Braun to underperform Trump a little bit here as a non-incumbent, but I do not expect that underperformance to be by a whole lot. In West Virginia, another state that you can really anticipate how it's going to go, that is very Republican. The incumbent Attorney General, Patrick Morrisey, beat out some rhino candidates in the primary to become the GOP nominee, and that is absolutely huge. He will be a big upgrade over the current governor, Jim Justice, who isn't terrible, but he's nothing special. He's going on to be the nominee for Senate this year for Republicans, and Morrisey will take his spot. He has been one of the strongest and most conservative attorney generals in the entire country, so him being elevated to the governorship is a very good thing. And he will follow in Trump's footsteps and win by at least 30 points, but probably even more than that. Over in the state of Delaware, a state that I talked about in a recent video, it's been trending to the right quietly over the last decade or so. The Democrat governor is not running for re-election, so the Democrat nominee this time is Matt Meyer, the executive of New Castle County, the most populous county in the state, and he's running against the Republican minority leader of the House. Republicans do not have much of a chance here for an upset, but considering the races in the state have gotten closer and more favorable for Republicans, I expect this race to be within 15 points and be a likely Democrat state, with Matt Meyer taking the victory and being the next governor. Over in North Carolina, perhaps the biggest electoral tragedy of the entire cycle. Mark Robinson, the current lieutenant governor, he won a first term in 2020, is the Republican nominee, running against the Democrat incumbent Attorney General Josh Stein. Even though the state has been moving more and more to the right, the GOP has not won the governorship since 2004. It was thought that that drought would end this year, but it looks like the losing streak will continue, with Mark Robinson beset by many scandals and down massively in the polls. It also doesn't help that voters in the state historically vote red at the top of the ticket in presidential years, but split their ticket and vote for some Democrats down ballot. Hence how you had Trump winning in 2020, but Democrats holding on to the governorship. Democrat leaders at the state level had a very bad hurricane response, even though Mark Robinson had a very good one, was very public facing and on the ground helping and overseeing rescue and relief efforts. So I think at the end of the day, I think that could help him a little bit in a state that has been so beset by crisis in the weeks and months leading up to Election Day. But I still think, unfortunately, Robinson's going to lose by a decent margin, not even by a close margin. A state that should have been competitive has now practically sprung out of reach for Republicans at the governor level. Some polls are showing Robinson down by as much as 15 points. I don't think that's going to be the end result, but I do think he's going to lose by a likely margin, even though this is a swing state. I think he's going to lose by somewhere around 8 to 9 points at the end of the day. I really don't think he's going to underperform Trump by 15 to 20 points, but I think it's quite possible he underperforms him by 10 points or so at the end of the day. Very unfortunately. Now moving on to the final governor races, that being in the Northeast, we have Vermont, a very cursed state politically. Democrats running for federal office in the state win by some of the largest margins in the entire country. Yet they have a Republican governor, and a very popular one at that, who is running for a 5th term. And he's going to win by a comfortable margin. It's really no doubt, in my mind, at all. He led the only poll of the race at the end of the summer by 28 points. And he won in the midterms in 2022 by almost 50 points. He got 70% of the vote. That's absolutely insane. Republicans don't win by that much in Republican states, let alone in Vermont. Granted that he's a very moderate Republican, but still, that's absolutely crazy, regardless of the circumstances. Finally, in New Hampshire, we have the former senator from the state, Kelly Ayotte, as the Republican nominee, running against Democrat nominee Joyce Craig, the former mayor of Manchester, the largest city in the state. The current governor, Chris Sununu, was very popular, almost as much as Phil Scott is in Vermont. He won re-election 3 times very handily, but it's going to be a much closer election for Republicans with him no longer running. He is supporting Ayotte, so that's going to help her. She also boasts the fundraising edge and has the lead in most of the polls, even if only by a few points. Even though this is Democrats' best opportunity to pick up a governorship, I think Republicans will hold on, and I think Ayotte will win election as the new governor by a couple of points, probably about 3 to 4. So there you have it. Republicans are going to win 8 of the 11 governorships up for election this year, and Democrats will hold on to the 3 that they currently are in possession of. New Hampshire will stay red, and North Carolina, unfortunately, will stay blue. As a bonus prediction in this video, let's quickly take a look at the lieutenant governor races that are taking place this fall. In Montana, North Dakota, Utah, and Indiana, the lieutenant governor candidates for either party run on the same ticket as the governor nominee, similar to how the president and vice president nominees at the federal level run as one ticket. So as such, I rated those states the same way as they were at the governor level, since who controls the lieutenant governor office is tied to the governor race. Also, in New Hampshire and West Virginia, there is no lieutenant governor position, interestingly enough, in those states. So only 5 of the 11 states holding governor races also have separate lieutenant governor races happening down ballot. In Washington, the incumbent lieutenant governor for the Democrats is running again. I think he will win election easily, but the only poll out of the state was a Democrat internal poll only showing Democrats up by 12 points and the incumbent only being at 47%. So it very well could be within 15 points, and I think it will be, especially with the governor race being closer. In Missouri, Republicans, just like at the governor level, are in no danger of losing this race, but with the current lieutenant governor now being the governor nominee and no incumbent being in this race, I think it will get slightly closer and also be just under 15 points, probably about a 14 to 15 point win. Again, I would not be surprised if Republicans win by more than 15 points, but I just think it will be about or slightly under a 15-point win for the very solid lieutenant governor nominee that Republicans are running there. Over in Delaware, just like at the governor level, this is going to be a likely Democrat victory. and around a 15-point win for the Democrat nominee. It went blue in 2020 with the incumbent lieutenant governor running by less than 20 points in a bad political environment for Republicans. With the state gradually trending to the right and Republicans doing better there electorally, and it being a better national environment for Republicans, I see no reason that the GOP cannot get the race for the governorship and the lieutenant governorship within 15 points. In North Carolina, this office in the state, as I mentioned, is currently held by the GOP nominee for governor, Mark Robinson. So Republicans are trying to hold on to this office, especially since the governorship continues to elude them. The Republican nominee is Hal Weatherman, the chief of staff to the former lieutenant governor, Dan Forest. He's running against Rachel Hunt, a state senator. The polls have showed a tied race, or Rachel Hunt being up by 2 points. But in those polls, there are a lot of undecideds, and she's only getting 42 or 43% of the vote in those samples. Even though Robinson is not doing well at the governor level, Republicans are doing very well in the early vote turnout so far in the state as a whole. And considering the polls are very tight in this race, I think Weatherman is going to pull it out. And I think he's going to get a lot of the undecided voters in the polls to break for him and hold on by the narrowest margin in the state of North Carolina and hold this office for the GOP. Finally, the last race at the lieutenant governor level can be found in Vermont, another election that you would not expect to be close in this very Democrat state, but it's historically pretty competitive, especially in recent years. The Republican nominee against the incumbent Democrat lieutenant governor is a former Democrat turned Republican. He is being backed and has received the endorsement of Governor Phil Scott, which definitely should help him with a decent number of voters. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to put him over the top, but I think Republicans do have an outside chance to pick up the lieutenant governorship as well in Vermont, even though it seems crazy. Once again, no flips on my prediction map. Democrats will hold the 3 lieutenant governorships they currently control, and Republicans will maintain, even if narrowly, in North Carolina, the 6 lieutenant governorships that they currently have coming into this election. So Republicans have a 6-3 advantage in the lieutenant governorship elections and an 8-3 advantage in the governor elections this year, 1 week out of Election Day, according to my prediction. We will only have to wait 7 days to see how much of it comes true. Thank you all for watching this video. Once again, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and most importantly, get out and vote in this election.